Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me?
Music off. But his mic.
You look as if you can hear me. My first task is to welcome you. I'm thrilled to see so many friends of my past here, from so many aspects of my life. When I first sent a letter out about this launch, I wrote, and I've got it here, I want to stress that the launch of the novel is not the only purpose of the celebration. Of equal or even more importance is its opportunity for a reunion of many of us. I don't get around as much as I used to, and I look forward to see many of you again and to meet a few new Facebook friends. But if friends and relations who live abroad can use this launch to come to London, I would be very happy. Well, some have, and I am very happy. To mention, give you some idea of the guests that are here, I would mention, to start with His Excellency the Austrian Ambassador, who is over there, and I consider that as an honor. Several friends are here who've come all the way from Austria. One of them is the teacher in the school, which I attended before the war, before being chucked out of Vienna. But after the war, we became friends when his school put up a plaque in the memory of that event. It had all the names of the pupils and teachers, Jewish pupils and teachers who had been chucked out. And I can't see where he is, over there. And he was the main organizer. Other people here is a childhood friend from Vienna. She was 10 when I last saw her in Vienna. She fled to the United States. She's now over 90, and she's here just for the launch.
Where are you, Liesel? Here's Liesel.
One of my grandsons and his wife have come here from New Zealand. One wartime friend, that means I made his acquaintance during the war, has come by train today from Dunbar. If you don't know where Dunbar is just east of Edinburgh. Now, when I last saw him there, he says I saw him once since then, but I can't remember it. But I do remember the last time I saw him in Dunbar. I became friends with the whole family who was so kind to me. And he was the youngest member of the family. I was 24 and he was 6. And we've never, except for this one time I can't remember, met since then, and yet he's come here all the way from the north of Scotland. And I'm very happy to see him. About 20 guests are former pupils of mine. A large number from one of the schools and a smaller number from the other. And they're finished.
Oh, thank you.
And they're all over 60 now. So although I'm still remember being a teacher, I shall not give them any homework tonight. Or today, rather. Now, where am I? Well, I think that's all. All of you are here are friends of mine or acquaintances of friends of mine and I'm very happy to meet you here. Thank you very much for coming. My next job is to thank my family. 2 sons, 2 daughter-in-laws, 5 grandchildren, one of whom designed the cover of the novel. plus the wife of one of my grandsons, plus a friend of one of my grandsons, and they've all been working hard to get this place, this festivity started. I'm very grateful to them. I could never have done it. Thank you. Now about the book. I'm very cross with my nose. But the nose doesn't take any notice. So, I began to write a novel in the 90s. And it had to do with my war experiences. Then I made the acquaintance of an Austrian researcher and writer called Peter Pirker, who is not able to be here today. Peter Pirker was writing a book about Austrians who fought against Hitler. And that included those Austrians who had fled from Austria and joined the British Army here. And that included me. And he came here, interviewed me several times, he even interviewed me on radio, and we became close friends. And when his book was finished, he invited me to Vienna, and I attended his launch and answered questions for him, not from him, from the people present. And his publisher, who was there, asked me to write a book about my own experiences, an autobiography. I said, my German's not so good anymore. Peter Pirker said, that's all right, I'll see to it that it's good enough. And during the next couple of years, I wrote an autobiography in German. I'll give you the English title just because I've written it down here, otherwise why should I? It's called Vienna, London, No Return, Emigration into Life. The concept being that I escaped to come here in order to survive, because the Nazis weren't very friendly people. When I had finished with this book, and it was published in Vienna, that gentleman from that school made sure that there was a huge launch of it at the school. It was full of children, and a lot of them even bought the book, poor people. So, when I came back to London, the same thing happened, strangely. A lady called Helen Fry, I expected her to be here, but is she here? Helen Fry, you here?
No.
Well, then she must be absent. So anyway, Helen Fry was writing, well, it's true, was writing up to 10 books by arrangement with a publisher here, his history publisher. And she wrote about the Austrian and German refugees who'd come here and fought in the British Army. And she came across my name somehow and came to me and interviewed me. She interviewed me again and again and again and again. But she was a lovely lady, and we became friends. And when she was finished with interviewing me, she urged me to write my autobiography. Well, I offered her my German one, but she wasn't interested in that. So I wrote another autobiography, and that's the one you have up outside there. And now, what's it called? Secret Operations, and I can't remember. I don't think I'll bother now to get a copy just to tell you. I must point out that it is about the same life, mine, but it is not a translation. There's a lot quite different emphasis for what you write for an Austrian readership and different for what you write for a British readership. There are different things they're interested in about what happened to me. Anyway, there it is. If you haven't got one already, you're lucky. So, where am I now? When I had finished with that second autobiography, I decided to go back to that novel I had started with the war as background. But I had changed my mind. I decided that some of the characters I had invented for that novel had a life before the war started. And I started to write a prequel to that novel. Left it halfway written and wrote the one that you've also got next door, and I hope you managed to get some. I don't know why I hope that, but perhaps that's why you've come. So, how do I approach writing a novel? Well, you all know that events happen in the world and we react to them. Our lives are influenced by what these events do. Some good, some bad. And that has a lot of influence of what we do in our lives. That's how I wrote the novel. Only the other way around. There were a lot of things happening during my life, between the two wars. But they are not the main part of my story. It's not a history novel. It's the background to what happens to a group of people and the way they are affected, influenced by the events, and the way they react to them shows you the events. It's a way of describing events not as a lesson, but as what they did to people around them. And of course, the major event during that time was the growth of the Nazis. And so that is a major background to the story. I hope you like the story. When you read it, and if you like it, I'll be very pleased. And if you can, tell me. Incidentally, there's something I can tell you could do if you wanted to. If you really start reading it, it's not compulsory. If you start reading it and you have any questions, you've all got my email address. Send me an email and ask me the question, and I'll do my best to answer. Now, a bit of the background of the novel, a geographical one. The two major places mentioned in it are Germany and Austria. Munich in Germany and Vienna in Austria. And there's also a bit about Hungary. Now, nowadays you can find out everything about any town anywhere with your computers. But I'll just mention two things about Munich. One is a building that was, I have to look this up, called Palais Barlow. I think Barlow was the name of the British architect who built it in Munich. Anyway, Palais does mean a palace, a kind of mansion. That's what it was. But when the Nazis had become rich enough, they bought this building. Now, the Nazis chose brown as their favorite color. All their uniforms were brown. You probably know that. And so they decided to paint the whole house brown. And you'll not be surprised that from then on it was known and called the Brown House. It's not a color I would have preferred. I won't explain that. Now, it became the Nazi headquarters for the whole of their existence. And during the war, the British Air Force were clever enough to bomb it. And it ceased to be the Brown House. And I can't say I'm sorry. Now, the second place that's worth mentioning in Munich is the annual Oktoberfest. You've probably heard of it. People go there to drink beer from all over the world. They call it internationalism. They like getting drunk with people of other nationalities. And the major backer of this fest is a place called the Hofbräuhaus, yes. Hofbräuhaus is German for court brewery. And the Hofbräuhaus is a very famous beer keller. Well, it's a big house. It's got restaurants on 3 floors. And during the Oktoberfest, the waiters, a waiter is capable to, they have these huge tankards. A waiter is capable to carry, 12 tankards in each hand, balance them and not upset them. How he does it, I don't know. I've seen it once, but it's amazing. Well, that's not enough reason to go there, because they only carry them when enough people buy the beers. But as I say, a lot of people go there during the Oktoberfest to get drunk together. As I was there once, and I didn't get drunk, but the glass of beer I drank did. Now, turning to Austria, before 1914, I've got to be careful. The ambassador is here, and I say something wrong about Austria, I shall get lines to write or something similar. Before 1914, the Austrian Empire was the largest empire in Europe. It covered a large number of different languages, and had a lot of power. Empires usually do. So when the war began, it started with a Serbian citizen killing the son of the Austrian emperor at that time and his wife. The Austrian emperor demanded to have the man handed over to them so they could try him. But the Serbs, who were part of the Austrian Empire, refused, whereas the Austrian emperor decided to show them what's what and declared war on them. The Russians were a large country in those times, and the Tsar always wanted to have an entry to the rest of Europe. And he declared himself the protector of all Slav countries. And so when the Austrian Empire declared war, a big empire, on this little Serbia, the Russians declared war or made war on Austria. When the Germans saw that, they made war on Russia. All I can say is that one country after another declared war. And in the end, you had 2 huge blocks of countries over the whole world, even some in South America, I haven't learned it by heart because my brain's not strong enough. And so I can just tell you, it was a chain reaction, and in the end we had World War #1. It was a dreadful war. There was a lot of cannon bombing. The soldiers fought in the trenches. I don't think the soldiers of either side were very keen on the war. There's a famous story that during Christmas, the German soldiers on one side of the trenches and the British soldiers on the other side came and met in the middle for a peace period to celebrate Christmas. It's a touching story, and it probably shows you how stupid wars are. Well, you should do. Now, the British, with the final help of the Americans, won this war. And the British and the French and the Americans were in charge of the peace treaties. I'm already going into too many details. You probably know all this. The fact is that the Americans withdrew from them because the French and the British took no notice of their rather sensible suggestions. The peace treaties that were made, a lot of them with separate ones with separate countries, were very harsh. Germany in particular had to pay huge sums of money for a long, long time to the Allies. Now, you might say, well, that's all right. Well, they've lost the war, they started it. But you see, it wasn't very sensible, because when the war was over, business people wanted to trade again. And to whom could the British businesses sell things? Most of them were poverty-stricken now, and some of them had to keep on paying money to Britain. So the only way that they could have business exports was by making big loans to the Germans and the Austrians. Now think about the stupidity of that. These Germans and the Austrians had to pay damages, and in order to be able to buy things, they were given loans. That's by and large the background, all the background that you need to know. It will be mentioned in the book, of course. But of course, you can imagine that it had a lot of influence on the lives. And the strongest influence it had was that the people in Germany particularly were so poverty-stricken that they began to believe everything that Hitler told them, that it was the fault of the Americans, it was the fault of the Jews, and he told a lot of lies too, but they believed everything. And he was a man who shouted a lot and threatened a lot and said he would cancel the peace treaties, and he would build up the German army again. It all sounded very good. And eventually, as you know, he became the leader of Germany. But the book actually stops just before that. So this is the period during Hitler's growth. Now, there's one little thing I might tell you, which you might not know, that the party that he was the leader of was called the NSDAP, abbreviations, Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. That means National Socialist German Workers' Party. Now, the point I'm making is this. The German word for national is national, and that's the first word of that title. Now, in German, national is pronounced national. All Asian words are pronounced like that. And if you listen carefully, the first four sounds are Nazi, national. Although they're written with a T, that became a separate word with a Z. I think that's about all I wanted to tell you about that. Now, a little bit about Vienna itself. Some of you probably came to Vienna with me in a school party. Anybody here? Yes. Well, welcome. You should have come twice. And I'm very pleased that you've come, Maureen. Because, well, never mind. I can't start flirting here. Well, I could if I could. I'm too old. So, let's come back to Vienna. The inner part of Vienna, a little bit like London, is called the inner city. It has a big round, wide avenue around it on one side and a part of the Danube on the other side. And at one end, there is a castle called the Burg. Well, Burg we have in English, in Berg, a burger, a borough. This comes from the word Burg. And whenever a town in Britain was allowed to put a wall around it in exchange for paying taxes, it began to be called Burg, something Burg. And so you have a lot of cities in Britain ending with the word Burg or borough, Edinburgh, just to name a few. Where am I? Now, this Burg was very important, even after Austria had been reduced by the Allies to the small country it is today, by making a lot of the parts of their empire independent countries like Hungary, Romania, Germany. Austria was made as small as possible, so they thought Austria would never start a war again. They made Germany big. They didn't know. So this castle was very important even when Austria was a small country, because one of the dangers to the western part of Europe were invasions by the Turks, the Osmanic Turks. They had small horses, they rode very fast, and they won a lot of wars. They'd got as far as Hungary, if that means anything in your mind, and from there they started to go further west. But the first place in their way was Vienna. Now, in those days, if you were making a war, you did not leave an undefeated town behind you, soldiers who'd come in your back. Another important point was that you had to keep close to water, which in this case meant that they had to keep close to the Danube. So they had to defeat Vienna, occupy Vienna, and keep traveling along the Danube. Also, they couldn't travel very far from the Danube because on the southern side of Danube are the Alps, and they go all the way to France. They don't actually go, but you know what I mean. So I think there were at least 2 attempts by the Turks, but I've heard of 3. Was it 3? 2. 2 to get past, to defeat Vienna. But the Viennese Burg, the Viennese castle, had a huge wall around, very broad. The top was so broad that in peacetime it was used as an avenue, as a walking place for couples and such. And although the Turks had cannons, they never managed to totally breach the walls. And each time they had to go back. Afterwards, as far as I remember, the Turks and the Austrians made a deal, and they shared Hungary with each other. And for a long time, they were living side by side, almost peacefully, except from time to time they fought each other. And that didn't count. And that castle, you see, is has to do with a song one of my sons, this one, Paul, and I will trouble you with later. Now, one other thing about this center, the inner city. In the center of it, not within the Burg, outside, is a large square. It's called the Graben. That's German for trench. If you think of our English word for graves, you see the similarity of the word, and I suspect they are related. Anyway, on that Graben is a tall column called the Pestilence column, because it's there in memory of the time when Vienna had a large period of a terrible pestilence. People were dying in large numbers. There's a little story about one man who was entertaining in pubs during the times of the pestilence. His name was Augustine. And there is a song which became very famous about him, because what happened to him one day was that on his way from one of the pubs, he fell into this trench where they'd thrown all the other dead. But he was so drunk that he fell asleep when he was at the bottom. And in the morning, people came to start unloading the dead. To throw in a few more dead. And some of them landed on him. And he didn't like it. It woke him up. It woke him up and he shouted, "Hey, I'm still alive." One of them shouted, "You're pretending." And, well, now, I'm going to take the risk and give you an idea of the song that went round about him, because I think everybody knows the melody. Mind you, I'm losing my voice very fast. Oh, du lieber Augustin, 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 oh, du lieber Augustin, alles ist hin, Geld ist hin, Haus ist hin, weg ist der Augustin, oh, du lieber Augustin, alles ist hin. There's another one which says the same thing with another end word and so on. I hope you enjoyed that. Now, the last word about this. That Graben, this trench, if you ever go to Vienna, you're bound to visit it. But I just want to mention that at one side of it, there are a lot of very narrow streets going off, where at night all kinds of things may happen. And that is to tell you to remember when you read the book. Okay? Now, I think you and I are going to trouble them again.
Okay.
If you excuse us, we're going to sing to you beim Burgtor am Michaelerplatz. Burgtor means the castle gate. Michaelerplatz is the St. Michael's Square. And I'll tell you a bit more when he starts playing.
Okay. Come over this way.
I'll give in. I can't guarantee I remember all the words, but he does.
Oh, thank you. All right. Are you ready, Eric?
I think so. What am I supposed to do?
You're going to introduce the song and talk about your dad.
Yeah. This song, ladies and gentlemen, beim Burgtor am Michaelerplatz, is a typical old Viennese song. And it was one of my father's favorite songs. My father saw himself as a typical Viennese. My father loved Vienna. And it hit him harder than anyone in my family when we had to leave. And yet, despite his love for Vienna, when the war was over, he refused to go back to Vienna. Now the song, it's about a grandfather who remembers when in his youth he was meeting his sweetheart at the castle gate on the St. Michael's Square. They would go up to the wall, to the castle wall, and stroll there, hand in hand, and kissing in the moonlight. And they looked down on Vienna, dreaming. He was very happy.
Der
Großvater hat uns die Geschichte oft erzählt, wie mich vermählt hat mit der Welt. Wir Kinder, wir lauschten mit neugierigem Blick, wenn uns erzählt hat vom einstigen Glück. Nahm seinen Stößer das schönste Gewand und hielt rote Rosen für sie in der Hand. Und als der Abend brach langsam herein, ging klopfenden Herzens zum Stell dich ein. Beim Burgtor am Michaeler Platz, da hat oft gewartet mein lieber Schatz. Wir gingen zusammen dann auf die Bastei. So glücklich war niemand als damals wir zwei. Beim Mondschein habe ich sie geküsst. Wir fühlten, wissen doch, die Liebe ist, und sahen hinunter aus träumender Wien. Jugendzeit, warum bist du dahin? Jugendzeit, warum bist du